Street 77 years ago, and just share some of the few things that are around SOE in Crete and also the kidnap that I've come across or I've been researching that have yet to be written about. So the first thing, friends, you may know that with my brother Peter we've been tunneling into SOE locations in Crete, and we've found now over 100. And the overriding thing that presents itself to us is that virtually every location that Crete used is concerned with shepherding and the shepherding society, and yet in all the narratives about the kidnapping, about SOE, nothing is mentioned about the shepherds. From arrival, SOE officers would change out of their uniforms and put on shepherd's clothes. They were guided by shepherds. They were fed by shepherding villages. They went on shepherds' trails. Shepherds were their guides, and they lived in shepherding sheepfolds and in caves that had been walled in, and that if ever they were discovered, they were encouraged to keep quiet and let the shepherds do the talking to the German patrols. And there are two, one of the keys to this isn't actually from Paddy, but is from Tom Dumbaby, who was an archaeologist and who was head of SOE in Crete in the last year. And in his official report, there's a paragraph which says, "The shepherd is king. Our helpers came from all classes, but first and foremost from the villagers and shepherds of the mountain areas. Without these, we would not have carried on for a day. The shepherd is the true king of the mountains, knows everything that is happening, and most of them did all they could to help. Their excellent sight and swift feet, their knowledge of paths and caves and hiding places, their endurance of fatigue, cold and hunger, and not least their old-fashioned hospitality were at our disposal and made the shepherd the mainstay of our life in Crete." Now Paddy comes up with a sort of equivalent paragraph in one of his earliest writings on his time in Crete, which is in Rumeli. And there's maybe 10-15 pages which I think is subtitled Cretan Interlude. And what Paddy writes is this: "But the high mountains for nearly 3 years were our real homes. It was there at the end of hours climbing and higher than the dizziest village that devotion to the Greek mountains and their population took root. We lived in goat folds and abandoned conical cheesemakers' huts, and above all in the myriad caverns that mercifully riddled the island's stiff spine. Some were too shallow to keep out the snow. Others could house a cyclops and all his flocks. Here at Ibex and Eagle Height, we settled with our small retinues. Enemy searches kept us on the move, and it was in 100 of these areas that we got to know an older Crete and an older Greece than anyone dreams of in the plains." So that's the first thing I wanted to say, and I'm working very slowly on a walking guidebook to SOE in Crete with lots of historical elements in it, and I've realised that it's impossible really to write about SOE in Crete without devoting a lot to the shepherding society. So that's my next kind of project that I'm turning into. I thought I'd share with you a second thing that I did just before lockdown. Some of you know I live in Oxford, and I went into the Bodleian Library and went into their newspaper archive. They've got the Times, Guardian, Telegraph, Express, all on archive there, and went to see what was actually written about the kidnap whilst it was actually happening, or when did it first kind of impinge on the British public. So The kidnap occurs on April the 26th. On April the 30th, the night of April the 30th, they walk over Mount Ida in the most appalling weather, and then they kind of climb down the other side of Mount Ida, and they end up in a cave. So Paddy writes about that. It was appalling going for everyone. For the general, in spite of our help, it must have been an excruciation. There was not a glimmer of Anthony's guiding fires in the dark void below. One of Petrokiorgos' men said he knew of a sheepfold on a hidden ledge. We divined its whereabouts in the small hours by the sudden tinkle of a flock awakened by our crashing. After wolfing down some of the shepherd's bread and cheese, we all fell asleep by his fire, then before daybreak staggered on like sleepwalkers to a cave mouth and crawled through the bushes into a subterranean grotto to hide there till nightfall. It was a measureless natural cavern that warrened and forked deep into the rocks and then dropped story after story to lightless and nearly airless stalactitic dungeons littered with the horned skeletons of beasts which had fallen there and starved to death in past centuries. So that's the night of April the 30th going into May the 1st. On the same day, the kidnap is announced in Cairo, and that the general is actually on a submarine. The second day, so May the 2nd, it hits, and it's on the front, it hits Britain, and it's on the front page of the Daily Express, the Guardian, the Telegraph, and the Times. And what Paddy writes about that was their front page news, and clearly, in theory, in a submarine, is the following. The moon and the stars were hidden by cloud, and not a light showed in the pitch dark, but an occasional dog barking, the bray of a donkey, an untimely cock crow, or a random voice on the hillside. We could feel the presence of villages. We were able to move with more silence and circumspection now. Rain came swishing down. Marvellous for the olives, Manoli murmured. We waded through a stream and began to climb again. The rain turned to sleet. At last, the village of Ayaperskovi was only half an hour away. The Germans would have sentries out, perhaps patrols. Better to stop there. We piled into a ditch mercifully overgrown with cistus, thyme and myrtle. Protection from view, but not from the rain. And so they spend 3 days in that ditch, which is probably both, is certainly the what you might call the emotional low point of the kidnap. They fear that they're going to be discovered at any time. They can hear German patrols all around, and yet they're on the front page of all the major newspapers in the UK. If only they'd known. Now, in terms of this ditch, Pete, my brother Peter and I, we spent a couple of days looking for it. Hard, there are many ditches outside the village of Ayaperskovi, but eventually we came across an old man, and we asked him about this, and he was really clear. He said yes, and we walked for 10 minutes, and he pointed out the ditch to us, and our only corroborating evidence was that it had myrtle, cistus, and thyme. And Pete, who is a famous gardener, went, oh yeah, right, okay, myrtle, cistus, and thyme. So that's that thing. And then the final two, if I may, I don't know, the final two things I want to mention is that, again in Paddy's archive, there's a chapter of a book written by a man called, they named Scuttle George, Tarkis. And he wrote a book called Eagles of Mount Ida, which is only in Greek, but Paddy translated one chapter. And at the end, it says, George says this: the two, i.e. Billy and Paddy, had completely won the general's trust. All through the march, they had treated him with care and respect as their prisoner, and also as their senior in rank, with the good manners that mark English officers, particularly in intelligence. Leigh Fermor especially had become very much liked for his considerate feelings and kindness to all who had helped him, and for daring which passed all bounds. All who knew him in Crete respected him very much.
Yeah. Lovely.
And I've got one final thing. I've been pondering a lot as to when Churchill officially heard about the kidnapping. And what I've discovered in the National Archives is that SOE, probably Gubbins, had to submit a quarterly report on all of SOE's activities. And when it comes to the Balkans, in early July, he wrote, "The principal coup de main was the capture by 2 SOE officers of the German CNC in Crete, Major General Heinrich Freiberg. The general's car was held up at crossroads by British officers, and the general was removed to the mountains, whence he was evacuated to Cairo after 5 unsuccessful attempts." So for SOE and for Churchill, that was their main achievement.
And what was the date again?
This is early July. So it's submitted, so it's April, May, June report. Okay. That's it, friends. That's all I can.
Thank you.